Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining the class. Like we left off last week in the Masechet Bava Basra, in the third chapter, Chezkas Habatim. You have it in front of you, the English, the Bava Basra from Yachko Schottenstein edition. We're on page 41A2. And we left off this is a very brief overview from last week about the concept of Chazakah, that in the transaction and the transferring of ownership from person A to person B, as I said last week, there are different kind of ways how we transfer ownership, whether it's in the form of when you a sale, mechira, matana, gift, inheritance. When you fire objects which are ownerless, which are called hefker, how do you acquire them? And they're not all the same kind of acts of acquisition. And then there's the form which we're learning, which is the concept of chazakah. And chazakah means uncontested occupancy of real property, land, houses, that creates the legal presentation that the current occupant owns the occupied premises. And there's the concept of, which we discussed last week, of 3 years, that someone lives in a property, is in a property, develops a property for 3 years uncontested, meaning that, hi Catherine, uncontested, that no one comes and says it's theirs. So, and the person is there for 3 years and suddenly someone shows up and says, you're living in my property, then this is the discussion we're having. What happens? So if the person who's, this is the basic ABCs, the person who's living there for 3 years or dwelling there for 3 years says, I purchased this property, and he's there for 3 years, that's enough to be a sign of ownership, because even if a person comes who we know owned it in the past, but he wouldn't lie, the Rabbi said he would never let a person dwell 3 years uncontested in his property. And since this person is living uncontested, there's no question about that. And he says, I bought it from you. So he has the burden of proof now shifts to the person who's claiming it's his, who showed up on the scene. You have witnesses, you have a document, and if you don't, then it remains with the person there. Now, the Mishnah says, but what about if a person who's living in property for 3 years doesn't say, I purchased it from you? Concept, a chazakah where there is no claim that I just ended up there. Something like a squatter's right. That's not enough proof that it's yours. Even though the person didn't come in 3 years, that's not enough to say that it's yours. You're going to have to, the burden of proof shifts to you that it is yours. The dwelling there alone is not enough to make it yours. You have to say something. Okay, and that was the basic of the Mishnah. We learned that with commentary Rambam. We left off last week with a story. And the Mishnah, the Talmud gets into the story about disputed claims of ownership. And we left off with a story, and we're going to have a similar story this week, a story of a flood which swept away the Makashin line between two properties. The first case was last week of Rabbi Anan. He was the person who owned the property next to his neighbor. The line was swept away, and he went ahead and they made a new fence. And lo and behold, the neighbor now says, "Hey, 20 feet of my property. You took 10 feet of my property. That fence has to be over to further to your side." But so that was the question which was raised. Well, what happens? And they came to the course of the Rabbi. Also, Nachman had adjudicated. And the bottom line was of last week's case was Rabbi Nachman adjudicated and said, "Hey, you don't remember, and you don't remember. In other words, you don't have any proof. Okay? He says it's his. That you say it's yours. You didn't say you purchased it from him. You say, in a sense, he gave it or relinquished ownership of it because he allowed you or even participated with you in building that new fence, and he built it in to what he now claims is his property, but he did that. So you're saying, well, that seems that he walked from it, and I got it, and it's mine. So Rabbi Nachman did not accept Rabbi Anan's claim, and he restored this back and said, we've got to move this divider. Got to move it from where you put it now. Got to move it to where he says it was. The burden of proof is on you. You don't have any proof. You didn't buy it. That's for sure. You're just claiming because he put up the fence with you. You didn't know, and he didn't know, and it was his. We know for a fact this piece of property was his. We go back to the way it was in the original separation between two neighbors. That's more or less how we left it last week. Now we come to another case like that. Okay, a case. The Gemara is not satisfied with one case, and we're going to introduce a whole nother discussion here. Okay, let's start 41a2 on the right side. Rav Kahana, now we're talking about Rav Kahana, before the Rabbanan. Rav Kahana, Shakal Bitka Ba'are. A flood swept through Rav Kahana's land, destroying the boundary fence. Azal had a good Ba'are the later day. Rav Kahana went and inadvertently replaced the fence on land that was not his. That's 100%. Rav Kahana recognizes that he did that. His neighbors sued to have the land returned. Next page. So of course they got a situation here. They go to the rabbi. Also the comment of Rabbi Yehuda. 41b1. They came to Rabbi Yehuda to adjudicate the case. The neighbor went and produced two witnesses. Listen to the case. He produced two witnesses. Okay. What was the question here? The question became, how much land did Rab Kahana take, which belonged to the neighbor? So he brings two witnesses and says, okay. Listen. He said, the neighbor went and produced two witnesses. One of them said that Rab Kahana had encroached 2 rows into his neighbor's land, whatever the rows amount to. It's a strip of land. And the other witness said that he had encroached 3 rows. So now we have seemingly the contradiction between the witnesses. One says 2, one says 3. What's the rabbi going to do? Rabbi Yehuda says to Rab Kahana, Zil shlim tat megetlas. Go and restore 2 out of the 3 rows mentioned by the witnesses. Why? Look at the footnote. Since both witnesses, Rambam said, testified that at least 2 rows of land were annexed, meaning they all agree that 2. There's the question about the third. The third row, there's only one witness who says yes, and one witness says no. So we have here, one says 2, one says 3. So he said, but 2 all agree. So he said, now comes this whole debate. Although the 2 witnesses actually offered contradictory testimony, because one says 2, one says 3, well, that's a little bit of a problem. Rabbi Yehuda ruled that each bit of information is regarded as a separate facet of the testimony. Thus, the contradiction can be seen as occurring only in regard to the third row of land. Concerning the first 2 rows, however, there's no contradiction, and therefore, Rav Kahana would be required to return the land. Okay, so let's try to understand what happened here. Again, I'm just not going to dwell on this, but the pshat, place, okay, 2 witnesses, question, the neighbor says 3. He says, it's mine because you allowed me to. There's a question whether it was 3 or 2. We have witnesses on 2. Both agree on 2. We only have one witness on 3. One witness is not enough to take it out of him, out of his Chazakah. Although we're not talking about, seemingly, we don't know if it's 3 years or not. Okay? But he has one. One says an extra. So Rav Kahana says we don't get the extra one, the extra row, even though there's one who says that the original owner, it's really his land. We don't rely on that. We don't rely on that because he is saying that you, in a sense, gifted me or allowed me. So when you allowed me to put up that fence, you, in a sense, gifted me the property. So I am saying this property was gifted to me by you. You only have one, and you're saying I did not. Well, you didn't say anything. You didn't say anything that I couldn't take it. You were there when I put up the fence. So just keep that in mind. Okay. Amalei. Rav Kahana objected to the ruling. Okay. He objected to the ruling. Amalei, come on. In accordance with whose opinion do you issue this ruling? You're allowed to ask, by the way, today it applies to, it's called Heichen Dantuni. When the court adjudicates a case, the people sitting in front of the rabbi can say, Heichen Dantuni, please, rabbis, explain to me, from where do you take this ruling? I want to know, based on what are you making? You're being arbitrary here? You can be arbitrary. You're basing it on halacha. So you're allowed to ask, okay? So I have a question, a little bit issue with the English saying I'm kind of objected to the ruling. You can say I'm kind of asked for clarification of the ruling. Objected. I mean, objected. What do you mean objected? Based on what are you objecting? Okay, sitting in front of okay, we'll leave that. Come on. In accordance with whose opinion do you issue this ruling? Okay, and he says, Reb Khan objected. The Rambam says, what's the pshat? Objected to Rabbi Yehuda's ruling on the ground that the witness's testimony were contradictory and therefore inadmissible. He's saying you want to separate 2 and 3. You want to say there's 2 witnesses and 2. That's why you're giving him back two rows. And there's a question about the third. But what I'm saying, it's inherently a contradiction among the witnesses. So disqualify them, b'chlal, that they're not here. And then it's his word against my word about what happened here. That's the claim of Rav Kana, now back to Rabbi Yehuda. So Yehuda replied, you asked me a question. On who do I base this ruling that I'm separating 2 from the third? Okay. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, and according to the ruling, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, the Tanya. Okay. We're taught in the Brisa. Okay. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, this is the Gemara, another, Beisham Basil did not disagree. I'll stay Kita Eidim. We got 2 sets of witnesses to alone. Okay, let me give you a background here. The concept, and I have here the Rambam with me. So I'll take out the Rambam because now we're going into an area of law which is called Hagodis Eidus, the obligation to come and be a witness. There's an obligation. And what did the Bezdin do when witnesses come? So there's a section in the Rambam which is called Hilchot Eidus, laws of witnesses. Okay, so the Rambam says, among the mitzvahs, the biblical commandments that we have is, number 1, for a person who knows testimony to testify in court. That's a biblical obligation based on a verse in the Bible that you have to come. You can't say, not my business, I want to get involved. I don't need this headache. No. If you saw a transaction, if you saw something that would happen, you can't just say, I'm going home, I'm heading for the cave. There's a mitzvah. You have to come to the court, even if you're not even summoned to the court, to come to the court and say, I witnessed this. Okay, that's a mitzvah, the Rambam says, for a person who knows testimony to testify in the court. Now, there's another mitzvah. The mitzvah is now on the court. The Rambam said, to question and to interrogate the witnesses. That's on the court. Witnesses come. Well, there's a process. The Bezdin, the court, the rabbis, which we do that today, because we do adjudicate on civil monetary issues, the Vada Greater Seattle, which I'm a member. We sit on courts, we sit on issues that they come in front of us. Generally, on criminal issues, we do not, but some general terms, so we have to deal with something general, the guidance where to go. But the halacha is, when 2 Jews have a dispute, a financial dispute, you have to first come to the court, the religious court, before you go to the civil court. You have to first come to the rabbis, and the rabbis try in New York, they have big, what they did, rabbinical courts would sit on days and days on issues, one after another, come in, and when the diamond district, you didn't have to go first to the religious court. The religious court could then say, well, now you can go to the civil court for X, Y, for different reasons. So we say, there's a question that the court, to question and interrogate the witnesses. Interesting, which I'm not going to get into, the Rambam said, this is called what's question and what's interrogate. Lidvish means to question. And lachka means to interrogate. What are those concepts? But we're not learning now Hilchos Eidim. I'm just giving you these, we learn the Rambam, these are what the Rambam says. Okay, so we have that we have here, then we have here the following. We have 3, there are different, when the rabbi, the Bezdin, which is germane to what we're going to learn now, there's a process, a due process. They're the process, how they process witnesses. There's chakira and drishas. There is that which I just said is, you're supposed to interrogate and you have to ask questions. And then there's called another one, which is called chakira. Chakira is something which is not germane. It's not germane, exact, fundamental to the testimony. It's mental, but it's also part of what we do as rabbis. I'll give you an example. What's the difference between a chakira drisha and a bedika, which is going to, like I said, to lead into this mishnah halacha. Okay, the Rambam says very clearly, what is the difference between chakiras and drishas and bedikas? Between interrogation and this asking questions which are not germane. The Rambam, this is chapter 2 from Hilchot. Okay, for example, I'll give you some of the 7 one. Which month? Which week? Which day? How many hours in the day? Which place? Where did it happen? Where did the loan take place? Okay. What would that's germane. That's basic, and that you have to, the witnesses have to give exact answers. What is a bedika, which is not so germane or not involving fundamental aspects of testimony? Forget, they tell you, okay, what color was the shirt? What color was the dress? What color was, okay, where was they were under a fig tree. Okay, that's the place where it happened. What color were the figs? These are called bedikas. Now, biblically, there's chakiras, drishas, and chakiras. You have to have, there's interrogation or questions which are germane, then questions are not germane. And these are all biblical that you have to answer. The rabbis came along and said, the rabbis have the right to do it. This is going back 1,000 years. They said, you know what? When it comes to dinner momentus, when it comes to financial transactions, chakira and drisha, that which is germane, which day of the month, which day of the week, where it took place, which city, they have to be proficient, the witnesses. What color they wore of the shirt, what color was the fig under the tree, if they don't know that, or even if they contradict each other on that, we're going to waive that. Why? Because we are establishing, understand the marketplace. If people are going to see that in order to have witnesses validating the transaction, they're going to have to go through this kind of a process of not only chakiras, but also not only drishas, but also not only chakiras, also bedikas, that which is color of the stem, they're not going to want to make any transaction. We don't need the headache. I don't want to get involved. I mean, they're going to take them apart when they come to the bezin. Who's going to remember a year from now what color shirt they wore? Okay, we're not. So the rabbi stepped in and said, you know what? We're saying that if they conflict on which city the transaction took place, one says Bermuda, one says Seattle, we got a problem. Okay, they wash each other. Okay, that's it. But if they're not going to remember which color shirt, even though it's part of the process, we're going to waive that and not, in a sense, invalidate them, or else we're going to close the market down. And we need a functioning marketplace. You think the Federal Reserve came along and said, we need a functional. The rabbis also, way back, said, we need a functional marketplace. We have to have transactions. We need business to take place. We need people to loan, and we need people to be able to borrow. So we're stepping in and saying in certain things, we're making it more easier for transactions to be able to take place. Okay, so here we have, that's the background on witnesses and the biblical obligations. So now we have an issue. We just had over here this issue about the Rav Kana, and again, the flood. And now we're talking about, Rav Kana says to Rabbi Yehuda, I'm asking, you're talking about what one says two people say about 2 rows. And the one says of the 2, 3 rows. You're accepting that I have to give back 2 rows. I'm saying, I'm going to say that they washed each other. If one remembers 2 rows, one remembers 3 rows, well then, they're inconsequential. They should be invalidated, and we wash them all completely. They shouldn't be able to be any witnesses. Where do you see differently? He asked Rabbi Yehuda. Okay. So now Rabbi Shimon, he says, I'll tell you where. You asked me a question, I'm going to answer. There's Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. What did Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar say? There's a machlekes. There's a dispute between the famous rabbis, Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. Okay? What is the dispute? Al shtei kita edim, in regard to 2 sets of witnesses to a loan. Listen to this. 2 sets of witnesses that Yankel loaned Beryl $25,000. Okay? She'achas emeres mona ba'achas emeres t'matzayim. One said the loan was 5,000 or 100 zuz, and one said it was 200 zuz. Okay? We have 2 kiteidim, 2 sets of 2 pairs of witnesses. And so we have 2 and 1. And we have 2 pairs. Now, we have to tell you another concept in witnesses, in Eidos. It said, Al-Pishnaim Eidim Yokum Dova. 2 witnesses are what establish an halacha, a reality. 1 witness does not establish the reality, but can obligate someone to make to have to swear about something. But you don't, if 2 witnesses say, that's why you have 2 witnesses that say a ksuva by a marriage. Under the chuppah, 2 witnesses, not 1, you have to have 2. Other things in Jewish, 2 witnesses, they establish, there's a whole pilpul, now we get into the pilpul, Rabbi said, is Eidos Makayim or Mavada? Okay? Do witnesses 2 establish the fact on the ground, or they clarify what happened on the facts of the ground? Are witnesses establishing, or are witnesses clarifying for us what happened? But the transaction makes it happen, not the witnesses make it happen. That's where they're getting deeper into the pilpul about what they did. But you need 2. 1, what happened over here? So here we had a case. What? There were two pairs of witnesses came. One said the transaction, the loan was 1 mana, 5,000, hypothetically. A second said 2 mana, 10,000. The loan was 10,000. You got 2 pairs, one says 5, one says 2. So what are we going to do over here? They both said there was a transaction, there was a loan. That Chaim loaned Beryl, Leah loaned Rachel money. That's for sure. We have witnesses, we got 4 witnesses saying that. The question is the amount. So what does it say? Beisham and Basil did not disagree. I'll stake to Adam in regard to 2 sets of witnesses to a loan. One which said the loan with 1 mana, let's say 5,000. One that said it with 200 or 10,000. Yes, that included in the testimony of 200 is a testimony of 100. Meaning, if you say 10,000, but they both agree to the 5,000, so do you have an agreement on these 2 pairs of witnesses about the 5? You have a disagreement with the more than 5. That both sets of witnesses are testifying that he borrowed a mana, 100 zuz. Looks like over here the case, they both say that there was 2 rows that we both agree. The third is a dispute. So this is how we bring this case of Beisham Basil by the loan into the case of the Metzah, that the boundary between properties. Okay, this is how they're joining together. So he said, there's no dispute about that. This is what Rabbi Shimon, remember, Rabbi Shimon ben Allah says, Beisham and Basil did not disagree on 2 pairs of witnesses. One says 5,000, one says 10,000, and 5,000 for sure happened, and he has to pay back at least 5,000. In regard to what did they disagree? What did Beisham and Basil disagree about this loan situation? In regard to a single set of witnesses, not 2 and 2, a single. One witness and another witness. One of whom said the loan was a mana, was 5,000 or $100, and one whom said it was 200 or 10,000. Okay, here we have 1 against 1. We don't have 2 against 2. Because 2 against 2, they all agree at least the 5,000 he has to go. He owes. In this, Beisham may say that their testimony is divided, and the loan cannot be collected. When you have 1 and 1, you don't have what you would call an entity, a body of witnesses, because a body of witnesses is 2. You have 1, who has the whole different reality in halacha. So he said, there's no collection going on here because 1 voids the other by 1. But Basil disagrees. Yes, Basil goes even further. Not only 2 and 2, but 1 witness against another witness, saying what happened, where Basil said that included in the testimony of 200 is the testimony regarding a mana 100. Since there are 2 witnesses testifying that he borrowed a mana, 1 mana, they both agreed that he took the $5,000 loan. So according to Rabbi Shimon, Basil accepts the common aspects of the testimony of two individual witnesses, even when they do not agree entirely. And Rabbi Yehuda followed this view. So Rabbi Yehuda says to Rav Kana, you know what? You asked me, where do I get this basis to your dispute about the division line between the two properties, you and your neighbor, whether it was 2 rows, 3 rows, you both agree that the witnesses say 2 rows, there's a dispute about the 3rd row. I take this from this case. I apply it. That's what we do a lot in the Talmud, and that's what we do today in Jewish law too. You take from another similar kind of concept in Jewish law or principle, and we apply it here. For example, today in our world, we got to talk about social media. Well, there was no social media 500 years, or 100 years, or even 75 years ago in halacha. How do you deal with social media? B'chal in halacha, certain things would happen there. So you apply certain principles, certain concepts, and you bring it in to modern kind of situation. You try to, with the rabbis, work out, well, how do you, based on this concept in the halacha. So, Rabbi Kana, so he says, Rabbi Yehuda says, you asked me, where do I base your dispute with your neighbor over 2 or 3 rows? I base it on the machlekes, on the controversy between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, and I rule, and generally we rule like Beis Hillel, where Rabbi Hillel said even one case, one witness, and they both agree on 5,000. They disagree on the 10,000, and the extra 5, where I say the 5,000 is collectible, says Beis Hillel, and I, Rabbi Yehuda, say to you, kind of based on that principle, I say, even though there's only one witness and one witness about how many, but they both witnesses agree that there were 2 rows here dividing, the question about the 3rd, I say, I accept that the 2 they both agree on, even though it's one kind of case, and you can say maybe they're conflicted, so just to wash them. No, I separate, just like Ms. Hill did there way back when, you remember Ms. Hill said it? I go according to Ms. Hill. That's my basis to your question. Where's my ruling come from? That's what he answered him. Okay, Afkan is not done yet. You know, the rabbi, he doesn't give in. Amalei, Afkan said to Rabbi Yehuda, wait a second. You say you're ruling like Basil, and you're applying Basil's ruling in his case and his dispute with Beis Shammai. You want to apply to my case with my neighbor, right? He said, I got them out of him, but I will bring you a letter from the West. Who's the West? The West is Eretz Yisrael, from Israel. This whole dispute, the whole issue, they were living in Babylonia, okay, in Bava. He says, wait, I'm going to bring you a letter from the West, okay? He said the Academy of Eretz Yisrael ruled like Shimon Allah that he would obtain a letter to that effect. He said, the Ein Halacha of Shimon Allah, that the halacha is not in accordance with the view of Shimon Allah. You're saying that you go according to Shimon Allah, who ruled according to Beis Hillel, the Mele, you're applying that in the case here between me and my neighbor. I'm going to bring you a letter from the rabbis in Israel who say the law is not like Shimon Allah, who said this is Pshat Beis Hillel. I'm going to show you such a letter. So the Rabbi Yehuda said to him, you know what he said to him? With an amalei, Rabbi Yehuda replied to Abkana, when you produce such a letter, how will you consider? Makes sense. You say you got a letter. You know, you got a letter. Interesting. Now, you're talking about great rabbis here. He said you go there. The question here is, when you learn the story, what's the obvious question to ask? The obvious question to ask is, if Rab Kana was coming from Eretz Yisrael, he was going to bring a letter from the West, from Eretz Yisrael, according to to support his position. Why didn't he say that right in the beginning? Why did he go through who you rule like and all? I'm going to bring you a letter where it says clearly a similar kind of case. The rabbis in Israel asked, number one, and number two, why would Rav Kana? Why would the Rabbi Yehuda? Okay, so he's entitled to his ruling. He's following Reb Shimon ben Elazar, who takes the position of Hillel. Why would he? And if in Israel they took a different position, why is he bound by that? Why is he bound by what? Why would he be bound in Babylonia to what rabbis did in Israel? He has his basis. He's got his line here. Reb Shimon ben Elazar was a great rabbi who learned and took the position of Beis Hillel in this case, who's the greatest of the great. Okay, and if you bought the letter, suddenly it's what? I will reconsider. Oh, you can say, let's say, We can say that I'm going to rule that way, but I'll hear what they say. Okay. So that's, again, this is the case here. And okay, so this we roll this. Now we're going to continue. The Gemara relates another incident in which a Chazakah was ruled inadequate because of a lack of proper supporting claim. We're moving on. In similar cases, we have here Chazakah, the concept of Chazakah. We're learning where can we say the Chazakah is, in a sense, validates the person's sense of ownership. And where do we say no? That is the question, it's inadequate. You're going to have to bring more. The onus is on you to bring more proof. Okay. Who gavra? There was a certain person, the Bakashta Balisa Abasham, who lived in an upper story house in Kashta for 4 years. Okay. He lived in an upper story, Awesome mother, the base Asriche. The owner of the house came and found him there. Amalei, and said to the occupant, "My boss, what are you doing in this house? Hey, buddy, not your house." Amalei, the occupant said to him, "Meplania zavanta dezavnimina." I bought this upper story. Maybe it's like a condo kind of deal from so and so, who I assume bought it from you. Who bought it from you? Okay. They came to Rabbi for judgment. Okay, so here we have this person living in an upper story for many years, 4 years, more than the 3 years of Chazakah necessary. The owner of the house doesn't say that the bottom part, seemingly everybody agrees he owns. It's the upper part now. He says, "What are you doing here?" And he says to him that I bought it from the person who bought it from you. He came to Abchia. Abchia said to the occupant, if you have witnesses, if you have witnesses that the person from whom you bought the upper story lived in it, even 1 day, I will establish it in your possession. But if you cannot produce such testimony, I cannot award you the property. Okay? Well, what's this 1 day deal? What's this 1 day? Okay. Let's look on the bottom here.
Didn't this come with the inheritance one, that there was the 1 day thing?
Huh?
That the person who says they inherited it from his father, but
right, but good point, Goldie. But this is not a case of inheritance. This is a case of bechira, the case of acquisition. This has nothing to do with inheritance. He's not claiming inheritance. He's talking about purchase, and he says there's nothing he had been mentioned here about inheritance. Okay, so
I was just thinking, since the same thing where the father bought it and then passed, then
that's a different deal, because
it's
by inheritance we say, like I mentioned last week from the Rambam, that we're not expecting children to be fully versed and up to date on their parents' transaction. That's a separate deal. Here we're talking about
buying from somebody else,
regular kind of purchasing and selling. Okay. The footnote said as follows: since the occupant admits that he did not buy the upper story from the original owner, it can only be awarded to him if it can be established that the person from whom he did buy it had previously bought it from the original owner. The occupant himself admits that he has no proof of this, but merely assumed it to be true. Thus, he has no definite claim of ownership to support his chazakah and is therefore of no avail. Okay, remember the case. This person who's upstairs is not saying to the person coming to him and saying, "What are you doing upstairs in my house?" that I bought it from you. That would be a regular chazakah, because he's there 4 years. You have no proof; it's yours now, right? Burden of proof is on him to say that he let him 3 years. That's a sign in some way of ownership. He's not saying that. He is saying, I bought it from someone else. That someone else bought it from you. Okay, that's what he's saying. So this is a weaker kind of a deal. It's a weaker kind of a claim to support the 4 years that he's living there. Because he has no proof, he has no proof. If he had proof that he bought it, that the person who he bought it from, that'd be no question. But he has no definite claim here. It's said like this. Nevertheless, there is a law that the court argues on behalf of a litigant who cannot be expected to know the facts of the case with certainty. We said it last week too, such as an orphan or an heir or a purchaser. Okay. Since the current occupant of the property cannot be expected to know how the person who sold it to him obtained it from the original owner, the court should argue on his behalf that the seller obtained it legally either by purchase or the gift. Thus, since the occupant had a chazakah of more than 3 years, he should be allowed to retain the property. A Priya ruled that indeed we do argue this on his behalf. However, it is necessary for the occupant to lend some credence to his claim by proving that the seller occupied the property for at least 1 day before selling it. Okay. Now let's understand this concept of 1 day. You have to prove it that at least 1 day he was there. What does that mean, the 1 day? 1 day. Well, wait a second. Is that person who we bought it from, the middle person, alive? Let's go over to them and say, it's yours. Show me a document. You don't have a document? You weren't there for 3 years. Were you there 3 years? You also had a document that you could sell it? No one says that. You lived there 1 day. Meaning the person who now is living there saw the person whom he bought it from for 1 day, whom he says bought it from the person who now said who owns the bottom part of the property. What's this 1 day deal do? He has no proof that the person who lived there for 1 day, the middle person, if he had proof that he bought it, okay, there's no question. He doesn't have proof that he bought it. Nor did he have chazakah. He doesn't have chazakah. No one's saying he lived there 3 years. The fellow now lived there 4 years. So what's this 1 day making it stronger, whether he lived there 1 day, didn't live there 1 day? Either you say you believe the fellow that he bought it from this fellow who said he bought it from you, and you extend the chazakah that you are there for 4 years to the person in between. Okay, maybe you can make a case for that. But what's this 1 day adding? What's this 1 day adding? So I learned the Gemara. I said to himself, what's this 1 day deal? You understand the shaila? Understand the question?
Yeah.
It doesn't validate anything more in any way of a transaction. 3 years is 3 years. A document that you bought it is a document that you bought it. Witnesses are witnesses. You're not saying witnesses. You're not saying a document. All you're saying is you're going to be believed if he lived there 1 day. And the Gemara is going to say the reason could be because he could have said he bought it directly from the guy downstairs, from the fellow downstairs. He says he doesn't say that. He said, so believe him. What's the difference? Why did it make it stronger the 1 day? What's this 1 day deal? And the Rambam rules also like that. The Rambam says 1 day. So when I learned the Gemara, and I remember now going back to the yeshiva, we learned Chezkas Habatim, and we used to learn, we learn buddies, across the table. So we had 4 to a side on benches, and 4 to a side. Shlomo Zachi, my chavrusa, he should be well. For Shlomo, Nebuch was stricken by and he's doing a lot better now. And we learned the same Gemara. The table, there was 8 and a table of 8. Boy, what was going on in that room? Whoa, loud, back and forth, about it. No, you don't know. We probably learned it in yeshivas going back to 1966, 67, right? That yeshiva. I remember this. I remember we had a question here, and then I learned it early in the morning. I said, that's the question. What's this 1 day? And we were going around, we took out the Rambam, we took out the codes. We wanted to get a grip on why did 1 day add anything to this case? Why? And I remember we were some guy, they were thinking that the other Gemara and piling up. And we spent a whole day in this. I don't remember we came up with an answer. I don't remember. But I remember the question. I do remember the debate, with a whole afternoon debate.
It also seems like the 3 years adds so much more because you can have the opportunity to work the land and harvest, and 1 day you have no opportunity to do anything like that to gain anything from the land. So it's just adds to your argument that what does this 1 day really mean?
I mean, you're right, and I say even more. If this owner of downstairs, let's say downstairs, we all agree is his, like a condo kind of deal, all right? If you say 3 years, he didn't show up. Of course he didn't show up for 1 day. What is 1 day going to do?
Yeah.
I mean, Here we're talking about 4 years. It's like 4 years. Okay, that's a question for everybody to do homework. To go with the Mr. Rabbi Google there and try to Google and come back next week with an answer. But I don't have the answer yet. I didn't have a chance to really go into it yet. But I don't have an answer to Shiloh. I don't have a question. This is something. All right. Let's continue. All right. Okay, it says but if you cannot produce, it cannot award you the property. Let's go to the next page, 41b2. Rav, who witnessed this exchange, commented, Amar Rav. Rav said, remember, this is taking place in a whole chabur in a court and all. Amar Rav, I was sitting before my uncle Rabbi. Remember, this is Rabbi, who the case was brought to, his uncle. When he rendered this decision, I said to him, does the man not occasionally buy and sell a property in a single night without ever living in it? Thus, it should not be necessary to prove that the seller ever occupied the property at all. Maybe he flipped it. Why? What is this one day going to do? Similarly, the same question. So the bottom says here, a person will, look at 12, this is from Rashbam. A person will occasionally resell a property immediately after buying it if he can realize a quick profit. Don't even have to buy it. Put it in earnest money. You know how many people in the good days when things were moving, they would lock it up and flip it. Or the flip. Thus, his failure to occupy it even a single day is not necessarily remarkable. It should not prevent the court from arguing on behalf of the current occupant, occupant. Bechia, however, did not accept this argument as evident from the conclusion of this discussion. He says we need the one day. And Rav, his nephew, said, I asked my uncle then. It's a norm. Things can happen. What's this point? Well, he asked it the other way. He asked it in the way that he could have had it, could have bought it, and could have sold it. That he didn't live there a day doesn't mean he didn't own it in between or didn't have buy list, didn't take on some form of ownership, okay? Like saying, I'm going to get into earnest money, ownership, or have to be a closing, and ownership, the whole separate discussion on law. Is earnest money that I lock up a piece of property? What kind of quality of ownership do I take only on the earnest money level? What kind of quality do I take on the level of really consummating the deal? I have earnest money, I can flip an earnest money. What kind of owner am I? That's a whole discussion on halacha too. And I've sat around the table as a Rav adjudicating about earnest money, where they said, well, it's mine, and this way what's not, well, you didn't close, and what level of earnest money, what makes it his, to what extent is it his, you have to open up the Shulchan Aruch to that. Not ruling at all. So he said, but his uncle stayed. He said, Rabbi did not accept Rav's argument. Did not. He said, no, I need one day. Okay. Rav now elaborates on Bchiya's view. He's going to explain further his uncle's view on this one day. Although Bchiya required some proof of occupancy, I perceive that it was his opinion. That if the occupant had said to the original owner, he, the man from whom I bought the house, bought it from you in front of me, and he would have believed, even without witnesses. Without him having to see it occupied for a day. Since if he were lying, he could just as well have said to the original owner, I bought up the story directly from you. Now we enter another kind of discussion on halacha, which is called migui. What's migui mean? Migui is like this. Yep. A person comes along and says, hey, he makes a claim, or someone disputes a claim in a certain way. And you say you believe what he says. You know why? Because if you really think the man's a liar or the woman's a liar, he really could have said something even better, which would have strengthened his position. He could have said something stronger. He didn't. So that solidifies what he says. Now you believe. That's called migay. Migay because he could have. Because he could have. He could have said this, and he didn't say this. He said this. If you really think so, either you believe him or you don't believe him. You don't believe him, then he could have said a better lie, which you wouldn't be able, which would have held up in court. He said like this. So Bechia says that if the occupant has said to the original owner, from whom he, the man from whom I bought the house, bought it from you in front of me, I am a witness. Yes, I didn't buy it from you. Me, living in this upper unit for 4 years. No, I not going to buy it from you, but I bought it from the person who I saw bought it from you. It would be his. And I bought it from him. I saw him buy it from you. I'm a witness that he bought it from you. I bought it from him. I've been there 4 years. Chazakah. That's it. The case would be over. The burden of proof would shift to the fella who owns the bottom unit. Prove that that sale didn't happen. It's like any chazakah. In other words, by saying I saw a transaction between you and someone I got it from that person, doesn't make it weaker in chazakah than saying it, I bought it from you directly. That's important here. What's the case? Chazakah is, I'm here 3 years in this property, uncontested, and I bought it from you. I don't have any documents, right? The person making a claim, although it was once his, has no documents that it's his now. We believe the person who's living there for 3 years, because we say a person wouldn't let a person live in his property for 3 years without coming along and saying, hey, you're living in my property. 3 years, the rabbi said, that establishes, right? Chazakah, we discussed that, right? Then the burden of proof is to the one who's coming to make the claim. The same way here is, if the case is that this property is mine, because I bought it from Yankel, and Yankel, I was there, saw what he bought it from you. I'm the witness that he bought it from you. Is his claim of Chazakah that it's his is as strong as he said he bought it directly from him. Okay? Which makes sense. Makes sense. He could have said directly, I bought it from you.
Mm-hmm.
There's always the migas. He says, must continue. Mehem, he would be believed even without witnesses. Since if it were lying, he could just as well have said to the original owner, I bought up a story directly from you. We believe him. I said, look in the bottom 13. Had the current occupant claimed that he bought the property directly from the original owner, he would have won the case based on Chazakah, right? However, he does not claim this, but claims instead that he bought it from a third person whom he saw buying it from the original owner. If he's not telling the truth about this, what is his purpose in concocting such an elaborate lie? It would be far simpler for him to claim that he bought it directly from the original owner. Thus, we must assume that he's telling the truth. We must therefore also believe him when he said that he witnessed this other person buying the property from the original owner. He witnessed. This migo item can only aid him, however, if he claims such a definitive knowledge. If he simply said, I assume my seller bought it from you, assume but not see, or what use is it to know that he's being truthful? He still has no evidence that the man who sold him the property ever held legal title. Therefore, unless he can at least one day, I can see that.
Because he doesn't tell a better lie? This I don't understand.
No, so let me say something. Migo is like this. You believe what the person is saying. Not to say he's telling a better lie, a smaller lie. We say he is telling the truth. Because what he's saying, because if he's a liar on what he's saying, if you think he's a liar, he could have said something different where he would have been much stronger. So we say what he's saying now is absolutely the truth. And the onus shifts to the other fellow to prove. We're not saying he's in question that he's a liar. He's not a liar. It's only proof that he's not a liar. It's not that he's less of a liar. It makes him, because if you don't trust him, he could have said a better lie. It makes him a truthful person now. He's truthful. You know? They're the truth. You got to be careful because, in life, I've seen people who are very sly. They'll say something because, they got it figured out. I'm just saying, and then I'm not talking about cases of financial cases, but this in human dynamics, they got it all figured out by saying something, they shave it, and you say, well, if you really don't trust him, he could have said something a lot more crazy, outlandish. So yeah, in human, but in halacha, it's not to say that the person is less of a liar. Migui establishes what he said is true. That's the concept of Migui. It's true. Not that it's true. It's a strong basis in halacha that you accept what the person's, so you say here. So again, but you need at least to say he was there one day. So that this is how it's explained. So the interesting, here comes the ksos tacheshin. If you have the Gemara in front of you. Now the ksos, let me tell you who the ksos is. He is one of the great commentaries in Jewish law. And in the yeshiva world, when you said a ksos says, we would, wow, the ksos. Let me just read for you what the ksos says. The ksos points out that it's not really necessary to resort to a migoi proof in this case. Why? Since the occupant claims to know with certainty that the person from whom he bought the property had bought it from the original owner, he is putting forth a definite claim of ownership. Listen to that. Definite claim of ownership. His chazakah alone should therefore suffice to demonstrate his right to the property, since it is now supported by a proper claim. The Gemara mentions the Migo argument here not because it is necessary to prove this claim, but only as a way of illustrating the acceptability of the occupant's claim to have witnessed a sale by the original owner and then to have bought it from the purchaser. The Gemara is stating, in effect, that this is no less than a claim that's stating that one bought it directly from the original owner. This is a Gaval to Gavot from the. He's saying more. The Ksos is saying it's not Stam Migui. He is saying it becomes like a real Chazakah. It's like it becomes as if he is saying, I bought it from you directly. He's not saying that. But the validity of his ownership takes on the validity of a regular chazakah of living 3 years uncontested, and then the original owner coming and saying, you're living in my property. He says, no, I'm here 3 years, you never contested, and I bought it from you. Even though he's going through a roundabout way, but the Ksos wants to say, it's not you believing him because of what he's saying, actually in the words that the person, he bought it from this person, bought it from you. We really, in essence, are believing him that it's his, as if he bought it from the person direct. Now, what's the difference? What is the Ksos adding here? What's the difference if we believe him because he bought it from someone who told him he bought it from that person and lived a day there for 1 day? Because it's a much stronger position to say that he is like the person buying it directly from the person than going through another hand in between. And you necessitate me and all. He's saying that this makes you like you are really a direct purchaser from the person, although you didn't actually buy it from him. It gives you the chazakah, the validity and halacha, and the ownership, the bailus, as if you did. As if you did. Like, for example, you could say, I'm going to start throwing something out on the table, but in the property and purchase, you say something, I got it from someone, I got it from somebody. It's like, for example, take Eretz Yisrael. Okay, this is going wild. This went through my mind now, okay? Wild. Take the land of Israel. We got it because we got it, because we got it, because we got it, because it's ours, because, all the way, go back, all the way back. Abraham, our father, Abraham, the other way. So we are like 1,000 down the line. Israel is ours because we are all the way down the line. Father, grandfather, ba. Or I say, it's mine as much as it's theirs. You say, it's mine as much as Abraham took ownership in Israel. The Jews today have ownership in Israel. In biblical Israel. I'm not getting into the politics. In other words, a Yid could say he had ownership in Israel today with the same feskeit, the same strength. And the Yid 1,000 years ago could say it, 2,000 years ago, time of King David, the time when they divided the land, when they marched into the land from the desert. Not that I'm here because I am their grandchild. I am here because I got it. It's mine. It's mine as much as it's theirs. Understand? I mean, wild kind of stuff. Wild. Okay, but that's what the Pilpul is. Wild kind of stuff. But there's a difference. And the difference is also in how you what's called in Hebrew the gisha, how you relate to that, to the property. I relate to the property because I bought it from you, who you bought it from you. No. I relate to the property, I bought it from you. That's what the Ksos wants to say. I relate to this property like I bought it from you. Yeah, there was in between something here. But no, I bought it from you. It went through another hand or two, but my ownership is like mine, like I bought it from you. This throwing things out. What is the Ksos adding? Think about Israel, Chavra. The difference when you come, you say, no. It's like inheritance. That's the core of inheritance, not even mechira. Let's talk about inheritance. I inherited from my father, who inherited from his father, who inherited from his father, the property with the German Sukri Machshimum in Germany, from my great-great-grandparents. I'm coming here like a grandchild, a third, fourth, fifth generation claiming, no, I'm not coming like fifth generation. It's my property. I'm not coming like a fifth generation here. That house is my house as much as it was my grandfather's house, my great-grandfather's house, and that's how I'm going to talk. You're living in my house, you took my house. Because as an inheritor, it becomes mine as much as it was my great-grandfather. That property in Germany is mine. And I'm coming, clapping on the table, it's my property, not my grandfather's property. When you go to court, you say, they're living on my property, not my grandfather's property. It's a different kind of thing to it. Ideas. So let's wrap this up here. Rava, let's go a little bit more. Rava said, Kavose the view of Bechia requiring proof that a cell lived there at least one day seems more probable. To Katana, and as much as the Mishnah teaches, one who comes into a property by way of inheritance, I even see that does not require a supporting claim. This implies that he does not require a claim, he does require some sort of proof that it's his. Yeah, proof. But my ownership in it is like my father's ownership in it. Okay? And the Gemara rejects Rava then, friends. Always have to have a counter. But perhaps the Mishnah means that he requires neither proof nor a claim. The Gemara suggests that even further, another way around Rava's proof, if you prefer to say that the Mishnah is no proof of Bechia ruling because Shana Lekech, a purchaser is different than a yerush. So he should do the Bechdi, since it can be assumed that a purchaser would not throw his money away just like that. So in meaning, the footnote says here in 16, if he to concede to Rav's inference from the Mishnah is valid, and the heir must prove that his father occupied the land for one day, this would not prove that a purchaser must do so. A person does not generally spend money on a property unless he ascertains the validity of the seller's title. We may therefore assume that the occupant of this upper floor did indeed ascertain that the seller was a trifle only before he paid for it, and there's no reason to require him to prove it. And once again, that's another svara, another idea. You're not going to buy something. The average person is not going to go ahead and buy a property from somebody without ascertaining that the person who's selling the property is the owner of the property. So that's another proof here that there was some ownership type deal in this whole transaction.